people have been asking me, when is the commodities bull market going to start? And with regards to gold, I have to say 4 years ago. With regards to commodities, I have to say 2 years ago. You know, the truth is, if you look back in commodities a scant 2 years ago, oil was at $30 a barrel. Now it's declined through 100. Copper was at $2.40 a pound. Now it's declined to $3.60. So when people ask me when the bull market's going to start, I need to say 3 or 4 years ago. We are certainly in a hiatus, and certainly people need to ask themselves a couple questions about the commodity trade. I would say the questions are in order of importance. Are we going to have a synchronized global recession that impacts commodities for a substantial period of time? The second question might be, with regards to commodities equities, will the increases in interest rates depress commodities-related stocks as they're capital intensive and it raises their cost of capital while lowering the capitalized value of their dividends? In other words, do you get caught in a negative delta? And I guess the third question is, do you believe that the conflict in the Ukraine will end quickly and peacefully? And if so, what impact do you think that that will have on commodity supplies? I think it's very important that we go through those questions, because I was taught early in my career that if you don't understand 3 things that can go wrong with a thesis, you don't know enough about the thesis to invest in it. So I hope I've nailed the 3 that should be at least in the top of people's minds. The reasons why people should be involved in commodity stocks right now is, I think, twofold. The first is society has been underinvesting in productive capacity around commodities for a very, very, very long time. The major oil fields that the world lives on today, the Cantarells, the Gawars, very, very, very old fields and well past their prime. And we aren't investing enough in exploration, in project development, or in sustaining capital to maintain current production, let alone increase it. The same thing is true with regards to sulfide nickels. The same thing is true with regards to copper. The same thing is true with regards to uranium. So the reason particularly that people invest in natural resources is because the chickens will come home to roost on the supply side as a consequence of decades of underinvestment. The second reason is that governments around the world are increasingly anti-resource, which is to say that they constrain new investment, new exploration, new development, which paradoxically makes existing deposits more valuable, limits competition. The third reason, and probably the most important reason, is that natural resource stocks are becoming cheap again. Cheap is my favorite of all investment attributes. Companies that are selling at substantial discounts to the discounted net present value of their reserves, giving you no upside whatsoever with regards to new project development or exploration, are pretty cheap, and they are abundant in the natural resource space. The difficulty I'm having is finding things to buy. While the seniors seem cheap, the juniors, which was my traditional area of expertise, seemed, and I think were, uniformly overpriced. But 50 and 60% share price declines have fixed that problem. So we're coming into a circumstance now where, rather than advising people to go always into the biggest and the best, I'm beginning to suggest that experienced speculators and investors begin to look at the junior side, particularly with regards to the private placements in the juniors. The deck has been stacked against check writers for years with very disadvantageous private placement terms. That party's come to a screeching halt, and the market's beginning to favor those of us who write rather than cash checks. I think we've been through a period of about 40 years that were fairly benign, as an example, mostly peaceful. So we didn't think about the effect of an armed conflict because we couldn't imagine an armed conflict. Oops. In addition to that, we decided, we being the big thinkers in particular, that we should rely on allegedly butterfly-friendly sources of power. And so we made some really amazing mistakes. Germany, as an example, deciding to rely on sunshine in the far north, where the sun doesn't shine. It gave them, of course, particular problems at night, which is sunlight challenged in any regard. The consequence of the Germans, as an example, shutting down their nuclear fleet post Fukushima, has had some very interesting unintended consequences. One was increased reliance on Russian oil and gas, which appears in retrospect to perhaps have been a strategic mistake. But the other is the incredible propensity for the Germans now, in their effort to go green, to burn coal. Not just any coal, but this really crappy lignite, the stuff that's full of sulfur and ash. So ironically, the green, rich Germans are the farthest of any of the European powers from meeting their Kyoto Protocol pledges. The consequence of the movement to green energy is that they're burning a ton of coal. Oh, and by the way, importing electricity in periods of need from France, which generates it from nuclear. You couldn't make this stuff up. You know, if you're anti-government like me, anything that causes them embarrassment is good, which means that I'm constantly confronted with good. In my own country, very recently, my president, I use that phrase advisedly, but my president has suggested to the oil companies that after years of telling them that he was going to legislate them out of existence, that they need to invest more. That's rich. Over the last 5 years, Exxon has invested twice cash flow, which is to say they haven't just reinvested their earnings, but rather they've leveraged those earnings and invested twice cash flow. It's interesting, too, that he is saying on the one hand that they have to increase investments, while on the other hand constraining their access to drilling sites. And beyond that, warning the large financial institutions that these will be stranded assets. So on the one hand, he's trying to get the oil industry to invest more while telling anybody who will listen that it's a sunset industry, that it's going to be legislated out of existence. Finally, of course, our president complains about the price at the pump, the gas pump. Mr. Biden is either bad at arithmetic, or he's bad at math, or he's just full of you-know-what. The pump price in the United States, the average pump price, contains about 7 cents per American gallon of oil industry profit and $1.36 worth of tax. How the president can wrap himself around that kind of arithmetic, in other words, saying that the oil companies are gouging, when he's stealing with both hands all the money that the motorist might bring to the pump, is amazing to me. I could go on, but I think you get my picture.